Hey guys, tonight we're slipping behind the stone walls of Topkapi Palace, through a side gate not usually noticed, past the fountain with the chipped rim, and into a garden where the grass is always trimmed at an oddly perfect height. Not a leaf dares fall out of place here. The air is sweet. Too sweet, really, like someone spilled a barrel of rose water and just let it evaporate into the trees. Somewhere far off, a harp string twangs and is immediately silenced. You're barefoot on damp flagstones. Your steps echo more than they should. It's so quiet it makes your ears feel like they're holding their breath. A fig drops off a tree with a sound that feels disrespectful. There's a man trimming a hedge into the shape of a camel, and he doesn't even look up as you pass. You could swear the shears he's using glint like they've never touched actual dirt. You, dear friend, are now inside the hidden gardens of the Ottoman elite. And you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing the spread of sleepy minds around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing near the marble edge of a rectangular pool. Water lilies drift across the surface like idle thoughts. Beyond it stretches a series of winding gravel paths, all leading deeper into a garden that somehow manages to feel both completely open and utterly concealed. This, you will learn, is not just any garden. It's the Sultan's garden, the Hasbache. Maintained by the Bostanji Corps, a group that blurs the line between gardener, guard, and something darker. You've heard of them, whispered about in the coffee houses of Istanbul. They prune vines and people. Their shears are sharpened for more than roses. You step further and the scent hits you. Rose oil, clove, crushed mint, and something more bitter beneath it. Not quite blood, but history's breath. Historians still argue whether these gardens were inspired by Persian paradise gardens or the older Roman villa traditions. What is clear is that by the 16th century, the Ottomans had transformed garden design into both high art and subtle governance. This wasn't just for beauty, it was for control. The pathways were built with specific curves so that your pace would slow. Your thoughts would quiet. You begin to notice no weeds, no bird droppings, not a single dying leaf. Everything here is compliant. Even the insects seem to fly in tidy little ellipses. And then you see him, one of the Bostanji. You've heard the name before. It means gardener in Turkish, but also much more. He wears a robe so clean it looks like it rejects dust. His belt holds pruning shears, a knife, a flask of scented oil, and yes, an axe. A short one with a dark wooden handle. The blade is ornate, but not flashy. And when the breeze shifts, you catch the scent of it. Something floral, sharp, and a bit medicinal, like lavender mixed with vinegar and iron. He nods to you as he trims a climbing rose vine. The way he handles the shears tells you he's not just a gardener. The Bostanji were a hybrid class, part elite horticulturist, part imperial bodyguard, and part silent enforcer. If you were high enough in rank to walk these grounds freely, you might trust them. But not entirely. because you knew that under that serene exterior, under the scent of jasmine oil and lemon balm, was a man who could strangle you with a sash or bury you beneath the citrus trees by dawn. They worked under the command of the Bostanji Bashi, the head gardener, a man with terrifying access and zero need for recognition. Some say he had a list of everyone in the palace who could be quietly removed if needed. Others say the list was blank because he had it memorized. You pause near a garden bench, its cushions strangely dry despite the dew. You notice the bench is bolted down. Curious, a design choice or a practical measure in case someone tried to use it as a weapon during an imperial picnic? You decide not to test it. An old Ottoman poem drifts into your mind, one you heard once in a tea house. In gardens where tulips bloom bright, the nightingales sing not for joy, but warning. A gardener passes you, pushing a wheelbarrow with nothing inside it. He hums a lullaby, soft, minor key, the kind of tune that makes your bones feel like they're sinking into your skin. You trail him deeper into the garden, where the path split into tighter coils. These inner circles are more private. Historically, these were the Sultan's favorite areas, where he could walk without his court and whisper things only the trees would hear. You imagine Selim II here, drunk on wine he wasn't supposed to drink, demanding peach trees that would bear fruit in December. Or Ibrahim the Mad, staring at a goldfish pond, convinced the carp were listening in on his secrets. The empire was shaped here as much as it was on the battlefield. Treaties were whispered in these groves, marriages arranged, eunuchs bribed, pashas vanished. You see a small wooden structure ahead. A shed? A shrine? It's covered in vines, but not randomly. Each vine is trained, directed, curated. You pause to admire it, and a night breeze carries the same floral metallic scent from before. The scented axe. You're starting to wonder about it. Why perfume it? Was it simply part of the palace's sensory branding? Was everything meant to smell like a dream so you wouldn't notice the nightmare? One mainstream theory holds that the fragrance was a deterrent for rot and rust. Practical, like adding citrus to a blade so the sap wouldn't corrode it. But others suggest more psychological reasons. The axe was symbolic, scented to signal purity or obedience. Or maybe irony, a clean scent before a dirty act. There's one story, totally unproven of course, about a Bostanji who executed a corrupt official under a lilac tree. They say the blade was soaked in rose and vinegar, and the last thing the man said was, "Even your axe smells cleaner than me." You smile faintly. You've come far enough tonight. The deeper garden waits, and the axe, still glinting, still fragrant, waits too. You're given a small wooden rake and a silken cloth. The rake isn't for raking, and the cloth isn't for cleaning. It's all part of the ritual. You learn quickly. Everything here is symbolic. Even the way you hold your tools matters. Thumb wrapped, not resting. Rake tilted just slightly eastward before setting it down. You watch others do it with practiced precision, as if the garden itself might judge sloppy posture. The Bostanji around you aren't talking, but they're communicating. One flicks a tassel on his belt, not decoration, but signal. Another kneels to trim a blossom just slightly too early in its bloom cycle. That, you're told, is a warning. You've officially joined the Ottoman horticultural ranks now, or at least the lowest rung. You're not planting carnations yet, let alone guarding sultans. No, today you're pruning back reeds by the pond, skimming insects off the reflecting pool with a cloth net, and making sure no frogs enter the royal portion of the garden. Apparently, frogs are unseemly. No one will elaborate. You're told something else, too. In this garden, nothing dies visibly. Leaves do not brown, petals do not curl. Everything must appear in permanent bloom. It's your job to keep the illusion alive, no matter how many wheelbarrows of hidden decay it takes. And it's a serious job. In the Ottoman court, appearances were power. That extended to everything: the shine on a eunuch's shoes, the fold of a janissary's sash, and yes, the alignment of rose bushes in the fourth courtyard. The garden wasn't an afterthought, it was a stage, and each plant was a line of dialogue in a play no one could ever admit was happening. Historians still debate the role gardens played in statecraft. Some insist they were simply meditative escapes, drawn from the Islamic tradition of paradise as garden imagery. Others point out that so many important imperial decisions were made under olive trees that it's impossible not to see political intent in the placement of a bench. You're beginning to notice how many of those benches face the palace windows, not toward the sun, not toward the flowers, toward power. One afternoon, while trimming the edge of a fountain, a senior Bostanji leans over and murmurs, "Do you know how many grand viziers met their end in gardens?" You shake your head. He nods toward a distant fig tree. That one's called the whispering tree. Not for the wind. You file that information somewhere deep in your brain under "Do not speak freely near trees." And then the training intensifies. You're woken before dawn, bathed, fed something like yogurt, but more bitter, as if your body needs to be slightly unsettled for the day ahead. You're handed a set of pruning shears carved with tiny tulip engravings. No one mentions their last owner. You spend hours learning how to walk silently over gravel. It's possible, barefoot. Roll your heel. Shift your weight to the outer ball of your foot. Try not to look like you're tiptoeing. The Bostanji do it with grace. You do it like someone who's late for a midnight snack. But you improve. You learn the rules of shadow placement. Not just where they fall, but how they frame you. A good gardener never blocks a guest's sunlight. A great one knows when to let the light fall across a noble's face just so, as if the heavens themselves were favoring him. By week's end, you're assigned your first official space, a curved arbor near the third courtyard, favored by retired officials and jealous brothers. You are not to speak. You are to sweep, prune, and water. And listen. That's the real reason you're here. The garden is a sanctuary, yes, but also a net, designed not only to soothe, but to trap. Here words spill more freely. Something about birdsong and jasmine loosens lips. Men whisper things they shouldn't. Lovers speak truths. Dissidents grumble. And the Bostanji hear all. There's a reason the Sultan trusted them to guard not just his orchards, but his secrets. One slow afternoon, while misting a cypress, you overhear a conversation. Two men, one young, one older, argue softly about a grain tax. The younger says the Sultan is distracted, too in love with tulips and concubines. The older shushes him, but not before the word incompetent is uttered. You glance toward a nearby gardener. He's still trimming a rosebush, but his hand has paused, just slightly, long enough to mark the moment. Later that evening, those two men are gone. Their names are never mentioned again. No one even seems to notice, but the bench where they sat is scrubbed thoroughly. Even the cushion is replaced. You think you can still smell the echo of worry in the linen. You begin to understand. This isn't gardening. This is governance. You ask another Bostanji why the tools are always polished, always carried in a specific order on the belt. He smiles and says, because the garden is watching. He's only half joking. One fringe theory, rarely spoken aloud, claims the garden was designed by mystics, members of a Sufi order who believed in divine geometry. The placement of each plant, the flow of water, the scent paths on the breeze, they were all part of a spiritual system meant to maintain imperial balance. A slightly overgrown vine might mean imbalance in the court. A wilting magnolia could be a warning from the divine. You wonder, was that why the axe was scented? Not just for ceremony or superstition, but as part of this larger system. Aromatherapy as symbolism. Perfume as power. The fragrance guiding the hand that guided the realm. You sit under a jasmine trellis one evening and let the scent lull your mind. It's sweet, heady, almost too rich. You start to doze, and in that twilight space between sleep and waking, you hear it. Someone sharpening something. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost musical. The axe. You know it's close, and not just in distance. It starts with a ceremony. Not a loud one. There are no trumpets, no drums, not even the faint clang of a cymbal. Just a gathering, before sunrise. In the garden, of course. Under the tall cypress trees near the fourth courtyard, where the palace shadows are still long and protective, like sleeves draped over secrets. You're told to arrive barefoot, your robes freshly pressed, hands washed in rosewater. No perfumes of your own. The only scent allowed in the space is that of the garden and what is given to you. You kneel on a woven mat, its pattern curiously floral, but not quite any flower you recognize. Beside you, 6 others do the same. Novices, candidates. You're not told what to call yourselves. You've been training for weeks, but this is the moment that makes you real, or removes you entirely. The Bostanji Bashi arrives. You don't look at him, you're told not to, but you feel him, like gravity shifting slightly. He walks slowly across the stones, the whisper of his robes quieter than the wind. There's a faint clink as something metal brushes against his knee. The scent hits you before you see it. Clove, lemon, something sharp and herbal, maybe thyme or mint. It's mixed with oil, musk, and the faintest trace of vinegar. And beneath that, iron. The unmistakable mineral note of a blade that's been cleaned, polished, and dipped in perfume. The scented axe. He holds it lightly in one hand, like someone offering you a chalice. You wonder if it's the same axe every time, or if there's a whole rack of them somewhere, each with its own personality. Maybe one is cedar-scented. Maybe one smells like marjoram and dread. This one smells expectant. You're told to place your hand on the flat of the blade, not the edge. The metal is cool and oddly smooth, like it's been touched by thousands of fingertips before yours. Probably has. One by one, the others do the same. Then the oath begins. You repeat phrases you barely understand in full, but you feel the weight behind them. To tend, to hear, to keep. To prune what must be pruned. To never let the garden rot. You swallow hard on that last one. A few of the others fidget. One recites too fast and is pulled gently to the side. You don't see him again that day, or ever. When it's over, the Bostanji Bashi presses a scented cloth into your hands. It's white, embroidered, and damp with the same oil that coats the axe. He nods once and disappears as silently as he arrived. No applause, no feast, just the wind through the willows and your pounding heart. You're now part of the brotherhood. From that day, you're allowed access to new areas of the grounds. Walled gardens where the fruit trees grow impossibly in season, where small fountains whisper the names of long-dead sultanas, if you listen just long enough. You find yourself trusted with rare seeds and sensitive information in equal measure. And the axe? You don't carry it, not yet, but it's always there. Symbolically, the axe represented the dual role of the Bostanji, beauty and discipline. It trimmed branches, but also ended bloodlines. The fact that it smelled like an apothecary didn't make it less dangerous. It made it more unnerving. That contradiction, the elegance of death, was the whole point. Historians still argue whether the scented axe was actually used in executions, or if that was just courtly rumor inflated by fear. Some suggest the blade was ceremonial, that true punishments were meted out with less poetic tools. Others insist the scent itself had symbolic power, meant to calm the condemned or confuse the senses just before the final moment. There's one particularly odd claim in a 17th century Ottoman traveler's diary. He writes about watching a gardener approach a nobleman in the third courtyard. The gardener bowed, presented the axe, and asked softly, "Would you like one last breath of jasmine?" Apparently the nobleman laughed, then paled, then disappeared. Whether it's true or not, that story passes around among the junior Bostanji like a bedtime story. Except in this bedtime story, you're the monster under someone else's bed. You now take part in patrols, soft-footed circuits around the outer edges of the harem walls, the treasury garden, and the ceremonial pavilions. You notice the scent of the axe more and more now. It's not always present, but when it is, it cuts through everything else, even the strongest hyacinths. Sometimes it's almost comforting. You start to associate it with order, with duty, with clarity. On one particular dusk patrol, a shadow slips where it shouldn't, a figure ducking behind a grape arbor. You move quietly, heart pounding like a drum muffled by silk. When you corner the man, he's no assassin. He's a court clerk, drunk, flushed, sweating rosewater and cheap wine. He sees the axe on your belt, not drawn, just hanging, and the scent hits him before your words do. He immediately sobers, drops to his knees, begins apologizing for things you didn't even know were happening: grain shipments, hidden letters, conversations in the baths. You take notes. You don't say a word. The next morning, 3 officials are reassigned to posts very far from Istanbul. One retires mysteriously. The clerk gets a fresh uniform and a promotion. The garden prunes itself, if gently prompted, and the axe never left its sheath. You're beginning to understand the truth. The axe is never meant to be used, not regularly. It's meant to be seen, or rather sensed. That sharp perfume, so pleasant, so cloying, is a reminder. Beauty here is dangerous. Obedience is fragrant. And everything has its season. One day, while trimming a boxwood hedge into the shape of a sultan's crest, a senior Bostanji leans in and says, "It's not the blade that keeps men loyal. It's the scent. They smell it and remember, even paradise has rules." You laugh, nervously, but deep down you feel it too. It's your turn now. You're summoned just after the morning mist begins to burn off, when the dew still coats the garden paths and the birds are chirping like they've just had coffee. A senior Bostanji appears at your door with a plain nod. No words. You grab your satchel, your polished belt with tools arranged just so, and for the first time you strap on the scented axe. It rests against your hip with surprising balance, lighter than you expect, but it carries a weight that isn't physical. The scent rises the moment it touches your robes: bitter orange peel, myrrh, sandalwood, and some sharp green note that stings your sinuses in a strangely pleasant way. You are assigned to the pavilion of the Felicity Gate. The Sultan won't be there, not today, but that doesn't matter. This part of the garden must always be ready. In the Ottoman mind, paradise must be permanent. No waiting for blooms, no off-seasons. The illusion is eternal. You arrive to find a stand of roses misbehaving. Their stems have overreached, climbing across the path as if trying to make a break for it. This won't do. You kneel, slowly remove the axe, and press its flat against the largest stem. It's not to cut, it's to warn. Roses, like nobles, must be shown the edge before they're truly obedient. You trim the vine back with your shears, quiet, neat. You tuck a few petals into your satchel for compost later. And all the while, the axe rests nearby, releasing its subtle perfume into the warming air. A passing official pauses. He doesn't speak to you, few do, but his gaze lingers just a little too long on the axe. You catch it in your peripheral vision, that half-second of hesitation, that tiny flinch of memory. Maybe he's remembering a cousin who got exiled to a garrison in Erzurum. Maybe he's wondering if the axe remembers him, too. Because that's the thing. They say the axe has memory. Not the tool itself, of course, but the ritual around it, the scent, the shape, the silence that follows it. All of it creates what you could call compliance through aromatherapy. Historians still argue whether the scent was ever changed for different tasks. Some suggest jasmine for ceremonies, rosemary for espionage, frankincense for executions. One obscure scroll from the Topkapi archives hints that mint was used specifically for discreet retirements, a euphemism even more ominous than it sounds. You return the axe to your hip and resume your rounds. Today, you're not just trimming plants, you're delivering messages. Literal ones. That's another duty no one tells you about in training. As a Bostanchi, you are a moving part of the imperial communication system. letters tucked in your gloves, sealed notes hidden in planters, words passed in a whisper while your hands are deep in a citrus tree. Today, it's a lavender bed that holds your message. You dig slightly at the base of the second plant on the left, exactly 4 finger widths from the outer edge, and pull a small oilskin envelope from beneath the soil. It smells faintly of rosewater, like everything else here. The message is not for you. You place it beneath the teacup on a specific stone bench, one you know a concubine will pass within the hour. It's all been timed. Nothing is unintentional in this garden, not even the bees. And speaking of bees, you're told to monitor the hives near the mulberry trees. Ottoman sultans had a particular fondness for silk, and silk, of course, meant silkworms, and silkworms meant mulberries, which meant bees. Everything is connected. One of your tasks is to scent the hives with a diluted version of the axe oil. It's supposed to keep pests away, mites, hornets, thieves. You're not sure it works, but it certainly makes the bees smell nicer. As you work, an older gardener joins you. He's silent for a long while, and then says, "Did you know the first sultan to carry a perfumed axe was Mehmed the Conqueror?" You blink. That seems theatrical. You want to say, "Are you sure?" but you know better. Instead, you nod respectfully. He believed, the old man continued, that if you take a life, it should not leave a stench. The garden must remain clean. That's the part that sticks with you. The garden must remain clean. A garden this beautiful, this symmetrical, this unnatural, it demands its own form of justice. There are no natural accidents here, no wild weeds, no stray dogs digging holes. Everything is pruned, placed, and, when necessary, removed. That's where the scented axe comes in. Not always used, but always ready. There's one story, possibly apocryphal, probably embroidered over the centuries, about a Bostanchi who walked into the Sultan's private orchard and found a young prince attempting to steal apricots. The prince laughed, said something flippant about tasting power early. The Bostanchi simply took out his axe and set it gently on the stone path beside him. Didn't lift it, didn't threaten, just let the scent rise. Sweet, sharp, unforgettable. The prince never entered the orchard again. Later, he became sultan. Reigned for years. Never smiled at an apricot. Power has a smell. That's the lesson. By mid-afternoon, the sun is hot and the air thick with lavender and citrus. You've returned to the pavilion courtyard to sweep fallen petals from the walkways. A scribe is pacing nearby, muttering calculations. He glances at your axe, swallows. He says, "You're new. I can tell by the way you carry it." You stiffen, unsure if that's a compliment. Then he adds, "Don't worry, you'll smell like it soon enough." He leaves you there with that. Just those words, and the gentle creak of the wind through the fig branches above. You don't know exactly what he meant, but you suspect it has something to do with permanence. That one day, the scent of the axe won't cling to you, it'll come from you. As if the garden has claimed you, like compost made man. You look at the blade resting at your side. For now, it's still scented, still ceremonial. But you wonder how many carried it, convinced it was only symbolic, until it wasn't. They say the tulip was just a flower. But here, in this garden, in this empire, it was a revolution in disguise. Velvety petals wrapped around dangerously delicate egos. You're trimming the edge of a parterre this morning, neat squares of hyacinths and bluebells, when the head of plant cataloging walks by muttering in frustration. "Too much red," he complains. "They'll think we're favoring the Caramanli faction again." Red, apparently, is not just red. It's a message. Everything is. In the Ottoman garden, the very arrangement of flowers was a political tightrope, especially during the infamous tulip era, Lale Devri. It began in the early 18th century when Sultan Ahmed III, thoroughly fed up with war and bookkeeping, decided beauty might just be the best form of governance. Tulips became his obsession. Not just any tulips, rare ones, striped, twisted, purple-edged, green-veined. Cultivars with names longer than palace hallways. He demanded they be bred, displayed, gifted, and of course, secretly hoarded. Tulip bulbs were traded like cryptocurrency. A single rare bulb could buy you a vineyard or end your career. And you, Junior Bostanji that you are, find yourself tangled in this strange web of petals and paranoia. One morning, you're given a single bulb in a velvet pouch. Instructions: plant it beneath the marble sundial in the Sultan's inner orchard. You're not told what kind it is. You're just told it must bloom before the end of the week, or someone might lose a pension. You do it, of course. You dig the precise hole. You mix the soil with compost made from boiled fig skins and leftover saffron tea. You whisper a prayer that probably sounds more like bargaining. Historians still argue whether the tulip era was a genuine cultural renaissance or an aesthetic distraction from a collapsing treasury. On one hand, it saw new art, public fountains, and elaborate parties with fire-lit floating tulips on the Bosphorus. On the other, grain prices skyrocketed, corruption bloomed like mildew, and the Sultan seemed more concerned with petal stripes than troop movements. But in the gardens where you work, the tension was always subtle. You learned quickly that planting the wrong tulip could be a career-ending offense. There was a story of a gardener who, in a fit of mischief, or stupidity, planted a Dutch hybrid next to the Sultan's favorite Ottoman strain. The resulting color clash was so offensive that the man was reassigned to Anatolia to dig irrigation ditches. He wasn't executed, just transplanted. And then came the real danger: tulip theft. You're stationed one evening near the third fountain, sweeping petals, when you notice a figure crouched too low near the royal border bed. He's not a gardener, you can tell. He's dressed too finely. Too many rings, not enough calluses. He's got his pouch open. He's lifting bulbs. And then he sees you, or worse, he sees your axe. You haven't even reached for it yet, but the scent is already in the air. Spicy, commanding. The wind carries notes of lavender, clove, and bay leaf. The man freezes. eyes wide, sweat rising. You say nothing. He drops the pouch and mutters something about being lost, looking for the kitchens. Kitchens in a flower bed? You escort him out, slow, steady. You never touch the axe. You don't have to. That's when you begin to understand why the tool is perfumed. Not just as a deterrent, not just for formality, but because scent lingers. Long after you leave, that man will remember the smell. He'll associate it with fear, with guilt, with almost getting caught. He won't return. Power here is olfactory. You're later told he was a courtier's cousin trying to smuggle tulip bulbs to Europe. Tulip smuggling was a real crime. Imagine that. A world where your downfall could be wrapped in damp brown paper and smell faintly of compost. There were underground markets, secret catalogs, Bostanji agents posing as flower sellers to intercept illegal trades. One scroll from the time notes an actual sting operation in the spice bazaar. Coded orders for early spring onions that were really bulb exchanges. Your duties shift again. Now you're part of the tulip registry team, tracking which bulbs are where, which have bloomed, which have not. There's an entire wing of the palace dedicated to this. Shelves stacked with sketches, wax-sealed notes, and jars of soil samples labeled with calligraphy more ornate than a Quran manuscript. It's obsessive, but in a strange way, soothing. Because in this chaotic empire, where viziers fall as fast as cherry blossoms, where harem politics swirl like perfume in a wind tunnel, the tulip follows rules. It needs light, water, rest. It has no interest in betrayal. One of your mentors, a long-bearded Bostanji who smells faintly of cinnamon and wet stone, tells you this: the tulip teaches patience. Even the Sultan cannot force it to bloom. And yet, people tried. You attend one of the infamous tulip nights. Private, of course. Lanterns shaped like flowers are floated across the palace pond. Musicians play zithers hidden behind orange trees. Poets compose verses on the spot, their ink infused with rosewater, so even their mistakes smell beautiful. You, like always, are not there to party. You are there to walk silently, to watch, to smell. The axe is on your hip. It carries a new scent tonight, something muskier, frankincense perhaps, a signal of prestige. This is not a night for punishment, but presence. Just being there with the axe changes the atmosphere. A minor official approaches you under the guise of admiring the lanterns. He says, "I heard your blade smells like paradise." You nod. He laughs nervously, then walks faster than is polite. Even here, at the height of pleasure, power walks softly among the tulips. You return to your quarters that night with a flower tucked into your sash, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder that in this empire, even beauty can become a weapon, especially when it's perfumed. Your feet hurt. Again. You've been assigned to the outer gardens this week, known somewhat affectionately as the Dusty Crescent. It's not glamorous. There are no tulip beds here, no trickling fountains, no concubines dropping silk scarves accidentally for you to pick up and pretend not to notice. No, out here it's all mulberry trees, squash vines, and piles of horse manure that nobody wants to claim responsibility for. But it's peaceful in a different way, and important. The outer gardens of Topkapi aren't ornamental, they're functional. This is where the palace's fresh produce is grown, where medicinal herbs are cultivated, where compost is managed, and, somewhat awkwardly, where more than one low-ranking official has been quietly buried over the centuries. You tread carefully. You're stationed near the olive terraces today, pruning low branches and keeping an eye on the wall walk above. This section is more exposed, less perfumed. You still wear the axe. It hangs at your hip, oiled and fragrant. But out here, the scent doesn't cut through the air quite so dramatically. You have to be closer for it to be noticed, which makes it more personal. You learn that the outer gardens are home to a different rhythm. The gardeners here aren't as stiff, not as ceremonial. They crack jokes in hushed tones and whistle songs that would never be allowed near the harem. They talk about the weather, about aches in the knees, about the pigeon that keeps stealing time from the drying racks. You start to feel human again. But don't let your guard down, not for a second. Out here, the garden still listens. One of the senior Bostanji, an old man with hands like tree bark and a voice like honey poured over gravel, tells you the unwritten rule. Even the soil has memory. He spits, mostly for effect. Watch what you say near the compost heap. It's where the eunuchs like to nap. You laugh, until you realize he's not joking. There are stories, whispered with the casual tone of palace gossip, about messages being exchanged in baskets of rosemary, about arguments staged near bean rows, purely so certain words could be overheard by precisely the right or wrong ears. You begin to notice small patterns. The same gardener always sweeps near the west wall when the Sultan's brother visits. A path is raked smooth at the same hour each day, even though no one walks it. One fig tree is always harvested early, too early, and the fruit disappears without record. Historians still argue whether these subtle acts were coordinated forms of resistance or just the natural rhythms of life in a palace too vast to micromanage. But here, in the outer gardens, you learn not to underestimate the intelligence of men with mud under their fingernails. And then there's your axe. Even here, where scent competes with manure and sun-baked stone, its presence matters. Once, a janissary wanders in looking for a shortcut to the kitchens. He spots you, dusty, sweaty, half kneeling in a rosemary patch, and starts to laugh. Until he notices the axe. Not even unsheathed. Just there, hanging, exuding a scent that shouldn't exist in this corner of the palace. Lavender, clove, and some oily base that makes it stick to your clothes like a whispered warning. He sobers, bows slightly, and leaves. That's the thing. They all know what it means. The axe, the scent, the silence. There's a minor scandal one afternoon. One of the compost bins is found overturned. Not by wind. Someone rooting through it. At first, no one says anything. But later, a rumor surfaces. A pouch of letters was hidden inside, sealed in wax, wrapped in lavender. You find nothing when you check, but you notice the axe feels heavier that evening. Not physically, spiritually. You polish it. The scent blooms under the cloth. This one smells more like myrtle than usual. Sweet, and sharp, almost medicinal. You sleep poorly. The next morning, you're reassigned to the herb terraces, specifically the mandrake plot. Yes, that mandrake. It's not a plant for beginners. In Ottoman medicine, mandrake was both cure and curse, used in sedatives, fertility rituals, and the occasional palace intrigue. The roots, twisted and vaguely human-shaped, were said to scream when pulled, though no one in their right mind believed that anymore. Still, no one volunteered to touch them, which is, naturally, why you've been sent. You're to trim the surrounding hedges and remove any growths that seem unnatural. That's the actual wording. You don't ask for clarification. You approach with care. The axe, again, is unsheathed, not to cut, but to carry. Its scent, stronger today, seems to calm even the garden. You half joke to yourself that if mandrakes do scream, the fragrance might just lull them to sleep. There's something about scent that transcends language. It's primal, deep. You start to wonder, was that part of the logic behind the scented axe? Not just ceremony or intimidation, but a kind of psychological disarmament. A sultan could command armies, but the Bostanji, they commanded scent trails. There's a document buried in the palace archives that mentions the practice of scenting executions. Not the bodies, gods no, but the tools, axes, sashes, even the floors of the execution chamber. The idea was that no foulness, no spiritual stain should linger in paradise. And the palace, remember, was paradise on earth. Clean blade, clean scent, clean conscience. You spend the rest of the week among the herbs. Basil, rue, oregano, tarragon. You learn to pluck their leaves without bruising them, to harvest in silence, to bury secrets in the roots when asked. And always, the axe is with you. Not drawn, just present. A guardian, a message, a memory. You start to realize that in the Ottoman world, scent was a form of governance. Fragrance marked borders between the harem and the divan, between ritual and rebellion, between survival and silence. Out here in the outer gardens, among the mulch and the bees, you feel it most of all. This place may be less polished, less perfumed, less observed, but here, too, the garden must remain clean. There's a moment, late in the afternoon, when the shadows fall just right across the orchard wall, and every fruit tree seems to lean in. That's when the real gardeners, the trusted ones, start doing the strange work. You're invited into a small grove today. Apricots on one side, pears on the other. Nothing unusual, except the layout doesn't make sense. The trees aren't spaced evenly. Some are planted in twos, others in staggered zigzags. From above, say from the tower where certain officials keep watch, it might look random. But standing here, raking leaves, you notice something. The trees form shapes, letters. At least they could. Ottoman Turkish is written in Arabic script, after all, curving, looping, flowing from right to left. You squint at the apricots. Is that a jim? Could the pear trees be forming a noon? Or are you just tired? One of your mentors sees you looking too long and chuckles softly. Don't stare too hard, he says. You'll start reading things you shouldn't. He isn't wrong. The Ottoman gardens, especially these silent zones, were not just about plants. They were codes in chlorophyll. Messages grown slowly over seasons, meant to pass meaning without a single spoken word. You begin to understand, in a world where speaking could cost you your tongue, or worse, silence was power. And what better medium for silent communication than a garden? Historians still argue whether these tree-based codes were ever truly intentional. Some say they were just rumors, gardener myths passed down to keep juniors like you from getting bored. But a few records, quiet ones, mention orchards being rearranged after certain viziers fell from grace. And one cartographer, known for his imperial garden maps, once scratched a note in the margin of his scroll. The figs now curve toward Persia. Subtle. Chilling. Today, you're pruning vines near the peach trellises. You've been given strict instructions on how many leaves to remove, how many fruit to leave behind. Not for the health of the tree, but for the health of the message. Each missing peach is a gap, a space in a sentence. You think you're being paranoid, but then you spot another gardener 2 rows over. He clips a branch, steps back, tilts his head, then reattaches a single flower with a loop of silk string. That's not gardening, that's editing. The garden has become a text, and the scented axe is punctuation. When you're assigned to carry messages again, they're even more cryptic than before. One note reads simply, "The lemons have turned too soon." Another, "The left path is overgrown." You never see a reaction, but 2 days later, someone's quarters are empty. Another man appears in his place, smiles too wide, voice too careful. You begin to feel the tightness of the work. Not fear, exactly, but tension. The kind of tension that rides under your skin like a stretched string. You start to dream in plants. You hear fig leaves rustle and think someone's calling your name. You ask your mentor one morning, half jokingly, "Are we gardeners or writers?" He smiles, brushes a curl of hair from his brow, and says, "We're editors. The garden writes the first draft. We remove what's unnecessary." And that's when it clicks. The scented axe isn't just a tool of enforcement. It's a red pen, sharp, fragrant, final. One day, you're told to inspect the pomegranate hedges near the ambastorial path. These are ornamental, of course, but they're symbolic too. In Ottoman lore, pomegranates represent unity, many seeds, one skin. It's a polite, politically loaded message to foreign envoys. The empire may seem fragmented, but it's bound. The pomegranates look perfect, but one fruit is missing from a tree, plucked too soon. You glance around. No animals nearby. No wind strong enough to knock it off. So why remove just one? Later that evening, you overhear a conversation between 2 senior gardeners. One says, "A missing pomegranate before a Russian visit. Not subtle." The other replies, "That's the point. There's a system here, a living, growing cipher." You start to carry a small book in your robe, not for prayers, but sketches. Diagrams of tree placements, notes on how many lavender bushes are trimmed in a week, lists of which rose beds have been rotated, and next to each, a scent. The axe's scent that day. Was it heavy on cardamom, minty, citrus forward? You're starting to realize the axe isn't just for warning or killing or status, it's part of the language. Its scent communicates mood, the garden's tone. It says, "Today we're watching," or "Today we're merciful." You even hear whispers of a more complex system, one in which the combination of plants and axe scent acts like an imperial cipher. Clove-scented axe plus hyacinth garden equals a policy warning. Frankincense plus iris beds equals upcoming dismissals. Rosewood plus sunflowers, no one's sure, but someone once lost a fortune the day that combo bloomed. There's one Bustanji, quiet and slightly limping, who claims the entire assassination of Sultan Osman II was signaled through a late cherry blossom and a cedar-scented axe. You scoff, but only on the inside, because honestly, at this point, it wouldn't surprise you. That night, you dream again. This time, you're in the orchard, but all the trees are made of ink. Their roots grow into scrolls. The fruits are wax-sealed letters, and when they drop, the ground shudders. You wake up with the smell of sandalwood on your hands. The axe is lying across your lap. You don't remember placing it there. The message has been sent. You were just the vessel. They wake you in darkness. No candles, no words, just a soft tap on the door. Twice, then a pause, then once more. It's the summons. You dress quickly. Tunic, sash, soft boots. The axe, already polished, rests beside your satchel like it knew the night was coming. The scent is different today, darker, heavy with oud and bitter orange, less floral, more decisive. You don't ask questions, you follow, down corridors that bend in silence, through the outer gardens, past sleeping olive groves and shivering grapevines, into the heart of the palace, where the garden changes shape. It narrows. Fewer blossoms, more moss. The water here doesn't ripple, it whispers. And then the ritual. They call it the midnight pruning. It sounds ceremonial, and it is, but not the kind of ceremony they put in the official scrolls. You arrive in a courtyard known only to the senior gardeners. No name, no map, just space, enclosed by lattice-work walls and a single tree at its center. A fig, tall, older than most of the janissaries. Around it stand 5 Bostanchi, robes darker than night, their axes glinting with faint oil sheen. You recognize the scent immediately: clove, sandalwood, and something sharp, almost metallic. They nod at you, not in greeting, in warning. You are here to witness, not to speak. The head gardener steps forward. He is a tall, lean man with a beard like storm clouds and eyes that have long stopped blinking unnecessarily. He carries no scroll, no orders, just the axe. He gestures to the tree. You begin to see it now. Certain branches are tied with silk thread, not randomly. These marks were placed earlier, deliberate, targeted. Each thread represents a person, a policy, a pressure point in the palace. This isn't botany. This is editing. You understand the metaphor. Pruning at midnight ensures that the wounds of the tree are unseen by day. The plant can heal in private. There's a kind of mercy in that. A kind of cruelty, too. One by one, the head gardener makes his cuts. Soft thuds, no speech, only the sound of blade against bark and the slow sigh of falling branches. You catch a glimpse of his axe as he moves. It's scented differently than yours. Richer, muskier, possibly with ambergris. There's a hierarchy to the fragrance. His scent outranks yours. His axe's aroma lingers longer, heavier. It's a status symbol you can smell. Historians still debate the nature of these ceremonies. Some suggest they were metaphorical, a way for the Bostanci to reaffirm loyalty, to trim not trees but ideas. Others believe they were real moments of judgment tied directly to decisions made by the Sultan's inner circle. The truth is probably both. In the Ottoman Empire, symbolism didn't replace action, it enhanced it, made it unforgettable. After the pruning, the branches are gathered, not discarded. They'll be burned in a specific brazier known to produce a smoke that rises straight into the sky. No swirls, no drifting. It's said that if the smoke curves, the decision was flawed. Tonight, the smoke rises clean. You're handed a piece of the trimmed fig, still sticky with sap. You're told to plant it near the old magnolia tree by the eastern wall. You do as instructed. No one explains why. The idea, you suspect, is continuity. Even the removed pieces of the garden return in some form. Nothing is lost, just repurposed. On your way back, the scent of the axe follows you. It clings to your robe, your skin, the folds of your sash. You pass a janissary in the hall. He steps aside, not out of deference, out of superstition. They all know about the midnight rituals. They just pretend not to. Later, in your quarters, you can't sleep. You sit with the axe across your lap, cloth in hand, oil bottle beside you. You reapply the perfume, not because it needs it, but because you need the control. Tonight's blend is yours to choose. You go with something subtle, rose, black pepper, and a touch of cinnamon. It smells like confidence dressed in velvet. You apply it slowly, polishing the blade until your reflection stares back at you from the metal. It's a good habit, they say. Keeps the rust away, keeps the soul sharp. One of the older Bostanji once told you, "Never let your axe lose its scent. The moment it stops smelling like something beautiful, it starts becoming a mere weapon." And in the Ottoman garden, a mere weapon is a dangerous thing. The next day, word spreads quietly. A certain pasha has been reassigned to Aleppo. A treasury official has resigned for health reasons. A cousin of the Sultan has left the palace on extended travel. No one links it to the pruning, not allowed. But the fig tree in the quiet courtyard, it looks lighter, happier even. And in its branches, new shoots are already beginning to grow. The garden heals fast. You return to your duties with a slightly heavier step but a clearer mind. The ritual wasn't just about removal, it was about responsibility. You've seen it now, up close, and you've understood what your place is. You're not just a man with an axe. You're the hand that shapes the story. One petal, one leaf, one fragrant cut at a time. It begins with a scarf. You're trimming mint along the harem wall. A delicate job, given both the plant's stubbornness and the proximity to people with enormous power but very little sunlight. When you spot it, a length of silk, pale blue, embroidered with faint pink tulips, caught gently on the edge of a thorn bush. It's positioned almost too perfectly, as if placed. You pause. You glance around. No one visible. But of course, you're never really alone near the harem. Behind the lattice screens and stained glass windows, someone is always watching, listening, breathing. You retrieve the scarf, tucking it neatly into your belt. You know what this is. It's not laundry. It's a message. You move on, hands in the mint, mind replaying every training lecture on discretion and etiquette. The Bostonji are expected to keep their eyes forward, especially here. This garden borders the private quarters of the Sultan's wives, concubines, and female relatives. It is the quietest section of the entire palace, and also the most dangerous, because here, in this carefully shaded enclosure of roses and climbing vines, politics takes on a different scent, one that's sweeter, more poisonous, cloaked in jasmine. The scarf is only the beginning. Later that day, a folded scrap of parchment appears in your watering can. It's sealed with wax. No insignia. Inside, a poem. The rose leans toward the wall too soon. A gardener may wish to prune. You fold the note once, then again, until it's small enough to vanish in your palm. The next morning, you find a trail of petals, purple hyacinth, leading from the date palms to the lemon grove. They don't belong there. The hyacinths are grown 3 courtyards away. This is not random. You follow the petals. They stop at a tree. A woman's voice, very low, speaks from the other side of the trunk. The mint has grown strong this year. You answer carefully. Too strong, perhaps. It may crowd the basil. Silence. Then, he favors her. The new one. Another pause. Then, she plans to plant herself deeply. You wait. But there's no more. Just the soft rustle of silks and the echo of footsteps retreating. You understand. The harem is not just a place of leisure and luxury. It is a court within the court, governed by its own laws, unspoken rules, and shifting allegiances. And here, the Bostonji play a role. Unofficial, unacknowledged, but crucial. Historians still argue whether the Bostanchi ever truly acted as intermediaries between the women of the harem and the world outside. Some say their presence was strictly ornamental near the harem walls. Trusted, yes, but uninvolved. Others point to accounts of intercepted notes, of whispered meetings near the fountains, of alliances brokered in the shade of the pomegranate trees. The truth is probably, as usual, somewhere in between. You become a regular figure along this path now, tending to the roses, fluffing soil, appearing always just when needed and never when not. You speak rarely, but you are spoken to. Sometimes it's a coded compliment. Your pruning of the plum tree was exquisite. Sometimes it's a warning. The fig tree seems to rot from the inside. Sometimes it's just silence, prolonged and expectant, hovering behind the lattice. The axe on your belt becomes a talisman. Its scent, today something like neroli and cardamom, signals not aggression, but presence. It reminds those watching from behind curtains that you are not just a servant, you are a listener, a conduit, possibly a spy, possibly worse. There is a peculiar kind of power in being useful to people who are never supposed to speak directly. One evening, as the shadows deepen, a small bundle is left under a lemon tree, wrapped in linen. You retrieve it without looking suspicious. Inside, dried cloves, a strip of lace, and a pearl earring. You don't know who it belongs to, but you know where it's going. Later that week, the concubine who had begun receiving too many invitations to poetry readings suddenly finds herself reassigned to a colder, less favorable wing of the harem. She stops walking through the gardens entirely. The hyacinth petals disappear. Cause and effect? Or coincidence? You don't ask. You don't need to ask. In the palace, the more you pretend not to know everything, the more people trust you to know everything. You learn to read the silences. You learn which flowers are left as gifts and which are left as threats. You learn that a broken branch leaning against a lavender bush can mean, "Meet me by the fountain at dusk," while a missing branch from the same bush can mean, "Forget everything I said." The axe's role shifts again. You realize it's no longer just for cutting, nor only for deterring. It has become a signal, a language all its own. You're instructed one afternoon to polish it with a new oil blend. No explanation. When you apply it, the scent strikes you immediately. Rose, definitely, but also something sharper, perhaps juniper. Astringent, biting, clear. It smells like warning. You wear it all day. You're stationed near the garden gate where the harem servants pass. Several glance at the axe, then lower their eyes. One even changes her route. The message has been received. There's an old harem proverb. No words pass the wall, but the roses remember everything. Tonight the roses are whispering your name, and the axe, hanging silently at your hip, smells like a story no one wants to hear aloud. You've seen him before, but only at a distance. Tall, robed, always with an entourage of silence. The Bostanji-bashi, the head gardener, chief of the Bostanji Corps. His title is modest, understated even. Head gardener sounds like someone who arranges tulips for imperial dinner parties. He does far more than that. He commands thousands. He whispers to sultans. And when he raises the axe, nations blink. Today he arrives early. No announcement, no procession, just a quiet walk into the second courtyard. His boots tapping softly on the marble, the scent of his axe arriving 3 paces before he does. Dark amber, lemon zest, and something you can't quite name. It smells like clean parchment and finality. Everyone pauses. Even the fountains seem quieter. You're trimming the vines around the ceremonial pavilion when you see him approach. He nods, just once. You lower your shears and bow. The Bostanji-bashi stops near the reflecting pool. He surveys the garden not like a man admiring beauty, but like an architect inspecting the skeleton of a palace. You realize then, he doesn't just maintain the garden, he is the garden. And today, he's here for a ceremony. You've only heard whispers of it, the presentation of the axe. It happens rarely, once every few years, if that. A performance of loyalty and quiet threat wrapped in floral elegance. The Sultan doesn't always attend, but his shadow does. One way or another, word of it always reaches his ears. You're chosen to assist. No one tells you why. No one tells you anything, in fact. A sealed note appears beneath your morning tray. Inside, 1 sentence. Prepare the garden. Fragrance, clove, iris, cedarwood. You work all morning in silence. Everything must be symmetrical. The magnolias trimmed evenly. The walkway swept until it reflects. The axes, yes, multiple axes, are cleaned, perfumed, and laid out on the ceremonial table like offerings. Each one carries a different scent, each one a different message. Historians still debate whether the ceremonial axes were ever used in executions. Most believe they were reserved solely for show, symbols of discipline, rather than instruments of it. But some accounts describe the Bostanjibashi selecting a scented axe from the table and using it before the scent faded. The duality is the point. At midday, the other Bostanji form a loose semicircle. No one speaks. The air is rich with fragrance, so thick you can taste it. Clove and cedar, rose and myrrh. It's overwhelming, a floral fog of power. The Bostanjibashi lifts the central axe. It's heavier than the others. Its handle is inlaid with ivory tulips. The blade has been honed so finely it could slice through paper mid-air. But more than that, it glows. Not literally, but in the way certain objects do when they carry history. The kind of history people don't write down. He turns the blade in the light, letting the scent rise. Iris for clarity, cedar for strength, clove for memory. You realize the scent is a message not to the nose, but to the brain. Each note means something. Each combination is a phrase in a language only the garden speaks fluently. Then he does something unexpected. He steps toward you. You try not to flinch. He extends the axe, not as a gift, as a test. You take it with both hands. It's warm somehow, heavier than it looks. The scent clings to your skin like ink. He doesn't say a word. You know what he wants. You kneel, lower the blade to the stone, let the fragrance rise. You hold it there, not cutting, not threatening, just presenting. And then, from the far archway, a procession. Officials, advisors, the palace steward, and yes, the Sultan's vizier. All here, all watching. This isn't a mere ritual. This is politics. The presentation is not for the Sultan, it's for everyone else. A reminder, a gentle floral reminder that the garden is not merely decorative, it is powerful, watchful, armed. The vizier approaches, eyes sharp. He stops 2 steps from the blade. You lower your gaze. You don't need to see his face. You feel the hesitation in the air. He smells the axe. Everyone does. Then the Bostanjibashi speaks. First time today. His voice is smooth and deliberate. The garden remains in bloom. The vizier bows, just slightly. May it never wilt. And just like that, the tension releases. Everyone exhales as if they've been holding their breath since dawn. The ceremony concludes. The officials drift away, eyes darting, pretending not to care what just happened. But you know they care. You return the axe to the display table, wipe the blade, reapply the scent, 2 drops of clove oil, 1 of iris, 1 of cedar wood, just as instructed. As you walk back toward the vine wall, your heart finally slows. That wasn't just a performance, that was a threat. Wrapped in petals, delivered with poetry. You think of something your mentor once said while clipping lemon trees. Power doesn't need to shout, Sometimes it just needs to smell expensive. And now you understand. In the Ottoman court, violence wasn't always loud. It was perfumed, polished, carefully choreographed in full view of the innocent and the guilty alike. And the Bostanji Bashi? He wasn't just the gardener, he was the choreographer of fear. It starts with a headache, a strange, creeping pressure behind your eyes. It's not illness. You'd know if it were. This is different, like your body knows something before your mind does. You're standing near the orchard wall, checking the alignment of citrus trees, when the smell hits you. Stronger than usual. Not unpleasant exactly, but piercing. Bay leaf, rose, a sharp medicinal note, camphor, something your body instinctively associates with urgency. You glance down. The scented axe on your belt looks the same, but the scent is not the same one you applied this morning. Someone has altered it. You blink, slowly. You are being warned. You excuse yourself quietly and walk toward the herb terraces. You take a longer route, past the bee wall, under the trellis of shade-loving pomegranates. You don't want to be followed. In a quiet patch behind the lavender beds, you find the one person who might help, an older Bastanji named Ferhad, who handles the perfumery stores. He doesn't ask why you've come. He simply uncorks a small vial from his apron. You smell it. Camphor, lemon verbena, crushed green cardamom. He raises one eyebrow. That's what you're wearing today? You shake your head. It was clove and rosewood. This isn't mine. Ferhad nods, unsmiling. It's not a mistake, he says. It's a message. You already knew that, but hearing it makes the headache worse. In the garden, scent is never arbitrary. The wrong fragrance on an axe isn't just an accident. It's a statement. Maybe even a sentence. You sit down on the cool stones and try to piece it together. Historians still argue whether the Bastanji ever developed a formal system of scent codes, a way to communicate through the specific combinations applied to their ceremonial tools. No solid records exist, but legends persist. One French envoy wrote in his travel journal that a lemon-scented axe once preceded the exile of 3 ministers. He thought it coincidence. You don't. Ferhad explains. Camphor means illness or suspicion. Verbena is urgency, not danger yet, but a push, a suggestion to act quickly. And cardamom, you ask? Memory, old business, something unresolved. You feel your stomach turn. This isn't a general warning. It's personal. Later that evening, you search your quarters for signs of tampering. You find nothing out of place except a folded handkerchief tucked under your mattress. Pale linen, embroidered with a pattern of tulips and pomegranates. You recognize the symbol. It's used in the palace kitchens, in the section where spices are stored. Someone from the provisioning corps left this, and they wanted you to find it. Inside the fold, a single clove, unburned, whole, gleaming slightly with oil. You have been marked, or perhaps chosen. You carry the axe to the fountain near the scriptorium. You sit beside the water, watching moonlight dapple across its surface, the breeze carrying scents from every direction. Rosemary, jasmine, that faint camphor again. You're joined, wordlessly, by another Bastanji, a quiet man named Jamil. He's younger, quieter than most, and usually stationed far from your section. He leans close, eyes on the water. You were near the royal ledger last week, he murmurs. You nod, replanting the citrus near the scribe's windows. There was a discrepancy, he says, in the mint deliveries. 2 crates short. You raise an eyebrow. That's worth changing my axe's scent? He shrugs. Mint is code for names. 2 names are missing. You let that sink in. Someone altered your axe not to punish you, but to remind you, or perhaps to recruit you. You're not being threatened, you're being looped in. That's the most dangerous part, because now you're carrying a scent that others will smell and respond to. You are, willingly or not, a messenger. You begin to pay closer attention to the responses. When you pass a scribe, he bows slightly deeper than necessary. When you walk near the infirmary, the healer at the door tightens her veil and turns away. A janissary nods toward your belt and says, "They've picked you then." You don't ask who they are. The garden knows. The garden always knows. You return to your quarters that night and strip off your sash. You wash the blade of the axe, not to remove blood, but scent. You scrub it clean, then reapply your original blend: clove, rosewood, cedar, familiar, calm, neutral. But as you finish, you pause. You add 1 drop of cardamom. You're not refusing the message, you're replying. In the morning, someone leaves a small gift outside your door: a sprig of mint and a silver pin in the shape of a fig leaf. No note, none needed. You begin to understand the deeper function of the scented axe. It's not just a weapon, not even just a signal. It's a key, a way of unlocking doors that don't exist, conversations that happen without a word, decisions made without a council. Historians marvel at the efficiency of the Ottoman court, the seamless way it seemed to anticipate crises before they bloomed. They chalk it up to surveillance, bureaucracy, perhaps fear. They rarely credit scent, but you know better now. This empire is not ruled by decree alone. It is ruled by whispers in lavender, and warnings in myrrh, and gentle threats in camphor and lemon leaf. And somewhere beneath all that perfume, you, axe-bearer, mint trimmer, silent editor of the living palace, are now part of it. The birds are too quiet. You've spent enough mornings in the imperial gardens to know how they should sound. Doves cooing near the stone basins, sparrows rustling around the apricot trees, the occasional sharp cry of a parrot that someone smuggled in from India and never had the courage to remove. But today, it's still, not peaceful, paused. You're near the fountain in the 5th courtyard, polishing the brass fixtures and misting the basil with rosewater. And then you see it. 3 bostanji in ceremonial robes, walking with that particular posture, calm, controlled, purposeful. One of them carries the axe unsheathed. This is not training. This is an action. You step aside gently. They pass without a word. But the scent lingers, and it is unmistakable. Frankincense, saffron, and the acrid bite of vinegar. That last note is rare, reserved. You've only smelled it twice before. Once during a midnight reassignment, and once after someone fell into the Bosporus. You feel it before you understand it. Today, something will end. A short while later, you're summoned by a steward. Not unusual. You follow the corridor that leads past the tiled kitchens, through a narrow garden path flanked with citrus and ivy, and into the ceremonial orchard, a private space bounded by high walls where major announcements are sometimes made in private before they echo out in public. A man waits beneath a fig tree, not a noble, not a sultan, a gardener like you, older, paler, hands stained with saffron and soil. You recognize him, Hassan, quiet, efficient, known for growing the best white tulips in the entire palace. He bows slightly when you approach. There's no fear in his eyes, only fatigue. The Bostanji Basha steps into view. He carries an axe too. His is scented with jasmine, orange blossom, and the faintest whiff of musk. He nods to you. Stand witness. You nod back. This is a formal act, a sanctioned removal, but it is not a public one. Hassan has been judged, by whom you don't know, and today his role in the garden ends. Not in anger, not in punishment, in pruning. Historians still argue whether the Bostanchi ever acted as executioners. Some say yes, especially for members of the court too dangerous to exile and too delicate to execute publicly. Others claim the executions were metaphorical, removals, demotions, transfers. You're about to learn the truth. The ceremony is quiet. Hassan kneels, not trembling, not pleading. The Bostanchibashi places his scented axe on a cloth beside him, not to strike, but to bless. Then he speaks the ritual phrase, "Even the tree that bears sweetest fruit must sometimes be cut to save the orchard." Hassan kisses the cloth. You step forward, holding a shallow bowl filled with perfumed water, lemongrass and rose, the blend used for final washings. You pour it over Hassan's hands. It trickles over his skin, mixing with the dirt and tulip oil. He thanks you, and then he is led away. Not killed, replanted. He will no longer tend the Sultan's tulips. His new post is far away, in the border province of Karaman, where the air is dry and the flowers are few. It is a quiet exile, a graceful removal. But make no mistake, it is final. You remain behind to clean the site. A few petals, a folded apron, a list of duties now yours to inherit. You pick up his axe. It still holds the scent, saffron, thyme, memory. You carry it to the perfumery chamber and carefully disassemble it. The head is polished, the handle stored, the cloth wrapping burned. That's the rule. When a Bostanchi is removed, so is his scent, permanently. No memory remains in the air. You wonder, who made the decision? The Sultan? The Vizier? The Bostanchi Bashi himself? Or did Hassan volunteer? You remember his face, not frightened, not defiant, just ready. That night, in your quarters, you polish your own axe. You refresh the scent. Rose, lemon balm, 2 drops of cinnamon. You carry it to your patrol, passing along the west wall of the harem garden. A eunuch nods, a scribe looks away. They've heard, they know. Word travels fastest in silence. You think about what Hassan taught you. He once said, while showing you how to tie up a sagging jasmine vine, sometimes the branch doesn't need to be cut, it just needs a new direction. You wonder if he knew then what his direction would be. There's a moment, just before sleep, when you see it all clearly, how the garden shapes not just flowers, but fates. How the scent of an axe can determine a career. How pruning isn't always death, it's transition, the gentlest kind of erasure. Historians may never agree on what truly happened to men like Hassan, but you will remember the fig tree and the scent that vanished with him. You're no longer surprised when the garden tells you things before anyone else does. You've come to understand the way a dropped petal, a trimmed bush, or a missing scent from a familiar pathway can whisper of politics more clearly than any scroll. But what still catches you off guard is just how much the Bostanci see, how far their duties stretch beyond what anyone ever suspects. Today, you are summoned before dawn, a shadowed figure at your door. No explanation, just the phrase, "Bring the axe, clove and mint." You know the blend well. It's standard for routine palace inspections. It signals discipline, but not judgment. Clove for presence, mint for alertness. Together they say, "We are watching, but not punishing. Yet." You follow the silent guide through a route you rarely take, past the bakery's tiled courtyard, through the torchlit path under the bronze trellis, and into a quiet stone building attached to the outer wall. You've never been inside this part of the palace. The floor is lined with gravel to muffle footsteps. The windows are narrow. One wall is entirely taken up by shelves of bundled scrolls, each bound in silk and tied with string. On a small table sits a set of garden maps, but these aren't for pruning. They're for surveillance. This is the records room of the secret patrols, an unofficial arm of the Bostanci. The public believes you're all flower trimmers, fountain sweepers, quiet decorators of imperial calm. But now you know. The Bostanci are also the eyes of the Sultan. And this room is where his garden breathes. A senior officer greets you, not the Bostancibashi. He's too high-ranking for this work. This man is lean, alert, with a streak of silver in his hair and the kind of stare that reads your posture like it's a confession. He hands you a small note, neatly folded. Inside, 5 names. No titles, no explanations, just names. You look up. He nods. Today, we observe. Not interrogate, not arrest. Just observe. And so begins your first patrol as part of the Bostanci's Shadow Division, the garden's secret police. You're assigned the fountain route, winding paths that pass through the informal meeting spaces used by scribes, lesser officials, and visiting scholars. There are no locked doors here, but much is still hidden. You're told to wear the axe openly, scented heavily. So you do. The clove rises first, warm and familiar. Then the mint, sharp and bright, slicing through the morning air like a polite warning. Historians still argue whether the Bostanci ever truly served as a full intelligence network. Some say the Sultan relied more on his viziers and personal eunuchs for whispers. But the sheer reach of the Bostanci within palace grounds, their presence in every courtyard, garden, bathhouse, and alley, makes their role as secret observers all but certain. And now, you're one of them. The names on your list drift past you, one by one. You see a scribe with ink on his fingers, muttering something into a lemon tree's bark. He glances at you, sees the axe, and clears his throat too loudly. You see a treasurer's assistant hand a folded cloth to a janissary. They exchange no words, but their fingers linger longer than needed. You see a steward trip, on a garden path he helped lay down just last week. The performance is awful, but you play your part. You help him up. You brush off his robes. You notice the clove oil on his sleeves. Coincidence? Unlikely. You record nothing, of course, That would be improper, but you memorize everything. Later, back in the records room, you recount your observations in the coded language of the Bostanji. The lilies at the eastern gate grow more tightly than expected. A fig was picked before its season. The mint reaches toward the jasmine. Each phrase is transcribed, logged, and stored. Not for immediate action, but for pattern recognition. Because that's how corruption blooms here. Not in shouts, in habits, in silence, in garden metaphors. You begin to understand why the axe matters so much, not just as a weapon, but as a presence. It says, someone is watching, and someone who knows how to use both steel and scent. You begin using a new blend for your inspections. Clove for presence, yes, but you add 2 subtle layers, angelica root and white musk. The former is cleansing, the latter nearly imperceptible unless someone's already afraid. It works. One afternoon, a minor chamberlain visibly sweats when you pass. He tries to cover it by offering a compliment about the orchid beds. You respond with a smile, and the phrase, "Ah, yes, orchids bloom best when watched carefully." He doesn't return to that walkway for 2 weeks. Another man drops a pouch near the fountain and flees before you can approach. Inside, a list of guest names for a recent feast with 2 curious additions. One dead, one disgraced. Mistake? Message? You don't need to decide. You just report. You learn that power doesn't need to shout when it smells good. You wonder how many people in the palace live in quiet fear of fragrance. How many associate the scent of clove and cedar, not with gardens, but with guilt? How many wake at night wondering whether they've smelled too much on someone else's robes? There's a saying among your fellow shadow Bostanji. If the tulips lean, we don't ask why. We just measure where. One evening, just before sunset, you catch a glimpse of something rare. 2 axes resting side by side on a bench in the perfumery. One is yours. One is someone else's. Their scent is darker, bolder, myrrh and burnt orange. You realize another gardener is watching you. You say nothing. You just freshen your blade, tighten your sash, and step into the garden again. It's not just flowers you're pruning anymore. It's narratives. There's no official summons this time. No note tucked beneath your tray. No nod from a steward. No garden path swept in an unfamiliar pattern. Just one word, whispered beside the lemon tree as you pass. Come. You recognize the voice, Semil, the quiet Bostanji who once explained the mint code to you. But when you turn, he's gone. Only a trace of cardamom clings to the air. You don't need more. You make your way across the palace in the early dark when the lamps are dimmed and the flowers close up like eyes that don't want to see. The familiar scent of your own axe, clove, cedar, and one soft thread of orange blossom comforts you. It's the scent you've always chosen for balance, for clarity. But tonight, there is no balance. You are being asked to do the unthinkable. You reach the Garden of the 2 Fountains, a seldom-used courtyard reserved for sensitive matters. The hedges here are higher, clipped not into decorative peacocks or tulip crests, but into screens, visual barriers. You hear the water, but not the wind. You smell the jasmine, but not the coming storm. Two men stand waiting. One is the Bostanji Bashi, the other is veiled. Not uncommon. You've heard of veiled messengers, veiled princes, even veiled sultanas on rare high-level walks. But this one wears a robe dyed the deepest green, a sign of the prophet's lineage, royal blood. You bow low. The Bostanji Bashi does not waste time. He hands you a scroll, unmarked, light. It feels empty. You do not open it. You know better. Then he places his hand on your shoulder. He says, "There is a branch that is grown beyond its purpose. Tonight we prune it." The veiled figure says nothing. But you smell the air around him, myrrh, sage, black rose, the scent of endings. You say nothing. You are handed a second axe. Not yours. It's older, the wood darker, the scent deeper, frankincense, bitter almond, and something metallic. It smells like memory. You carry both. You walk in silence. You know where you are going before they say it. The private library courtyard, behind the Sultan's own quarters. A place very few enter, a place even fewer return changed. The target is already there. Not a criminal, not a foreign spy, not a traitorous official. A gardener. You know him. His name is Halil. He trained with you. He taught you to keep ants out of lemon roots. He once shared a cinnamon bun with you on a festival morning when everything else felt too loud. And now he stands quietly beside the water channel, hands folded, robe pressed, belt empty. His axe is gone. You understand. He is not resisting. He has accepted. The Bostanji Bashi does not explain why. He never does. You only know what you're told. His branch has grown too far. Maybe he passed a message too directly. Maybe he chose a scent he wasn't permitted to wear. Maybe he simply knew something too long. You step forward. Historians still debate whether the Bostanji ever executed their own. Official records are clean, too clean. But stories persist. Of men who vanished after midnight flower inspections. Of boots left beside fountains. Of axes returned without their owners. You don't know what story you are now part of. All you know is that Halil bows. You bow back. You raise the older axe. Its scent is suffocating, like incense meant to bless a wound before it's made. Then Halil speaks. Just 3 words. Prune with grace. And in that moment, your hands freeze. You look to the Bostanji Bashi. He nods. Once. You lower the axe, not to strike, but to touch. You place it, flat, against Halil's chest. A ceremonial gesture. A mercy. A message. He is not to be killed. He is to be forgotten. That, perhaps, is worse. You accompany him to the outer gate. His robes are exchanged for gray linen, his sandals for bare feet, his scent for nothing. No exile, no prison, just removal. He passes through the iron gate, a branch clipped not by force, but by silence. And you return to your quarters with the older axe still in your hands. You clean it slowly. Apply the usual scent: clove, cedar, orange blossom. Then you add 1 drop of almond. Not enough to be noticed, just enough to remember. Later, you dream of Halil. He is trimming lemon branches beside a stream that does not exist. The air smells like forgotten things. And when he looks up at you, he smiles, as if he knows. The scent arrives before the news. It wafts through the fourth courtyard just after dawn. Bitter orange, anise, and crushed violet. Not your usual blend. Not anyone's, actually. It's too rich, too deliberate. The kind of perfume that announces something has already happened. You're near the mosaic pond, sweeping fallen plum blossoms off the marble, when a steward rushes past, face pale, lips tight. Behind him, silence, the kind that presses into your chest like weight. A second later, the bells chime, once. Only once. You drop the broom. You've heard that chime before, exactly once, during a training session buried in euphemism and careful phrasing. One bell means one thing. A sultan has fallen. Not necessarily dead, not necessarily murdered, just removed. You tighten your sash and head toward the inner garden. The scent is stronger now, undeniably violet, the flower of farewell, of last rites. In Ottoman garden language, it signifies not death, but departure, a gentle kind of vanishing. As you approach the Hall of Felicity, the Bostanji are already assembling, silent, still, fragrant. Each wears a different blend: myrtle and clove, cinnamon and mint, saffron and rose. You know what this is. You know what's coming. The last pruning. It only happens a few times in a generation, when a ruler has reached the end of his branch, either through illness, through failure, or through the invisible weight of 100 whispered grievances. Historians still argue whether these transitions were truly peaceful. The official records always speak of abdications, retirements, divine dreams. But the gardens know better. The plants remember which footprints vanished overnight, which fountains ran pink for a few hours, which axes came back with new scents. Today, you're one of the chosen. Not because you asked, because you're trusted. You're handed a clean cloth, a vial of oil, and an axe, not your own, but a ceremonial one, inlaid with lapis, perfumed with violet, frankincense, and just a drop of clove. You will not use it. That is not your role. You are there to stand, to witness, to carry the scent. The Sultan, no longer Sultan, is not weeping. He is composed, robed in white. He walks the garden path slowly, escorted by 2 senior Bostanji, both bearing axes. He passes the magnolia trees, the lavender beds, the rose arches. Each scent he passes is a goodbye. At the fig tree he pauses, places one hand on the bark. You recall the story of another fig tree many seasons ago. A pruning at midnight. A gardener who vanished. This is different. This is public, if only barely. As he reaches the final archway, he turns. For a moment, he looks directly at you. You hold the axe a little higher. He nods. And then he is gone. The wind picks up. Petals fall like sighs. And you, along with the others, begin the closing ritual. No grand speeches, no declarations. Just scent. You move through the garden in silence, reapplying oil to key corners: the fountain basin, the stone bench near the tulips, the gate handle. Each dab of perfume says the same thing. That time has passed. By the time the sun reaches its peak, the new sultan is already in place. You will learn his preferences in due time, his chosen flower, his signature scent. But for now, the garden is quiet. Later that evening, You return to your quarters. You open the perfume case. Select a modest blend: sage, orange peel, myrtle. You polish your own axe carefully, wiping away the ceremonial residue of violet and frankincense. You are not mourning. You are preparing. Because in the garden, no flower blooms forever. You sit by the window, listening to the wind through the citrus trees. And as the scent fades into the warm night air, you understand what no historian will ever quite capture: that in the Ottoman palace, the sharpest blade was always quiet, and it always smelled divine. Now let the night settle in around you. Let the scent of clove and rosewood drift softly through your thoughts, and feel the weight of the garden, centuries of it, pressing gently on your shoulders, not as a burden, but as a blanket. Your axe is resting now, clean, balanced, quiet. The perfume has softened into the folds of your robe. The breeze moves through the vines like a lullaby. Somewhere behind you, a fountain still murmurs. Maybe it's the same one you cleaned this morning. Or maybe it's older, whispering stories from a time when the garden was smaller, simpler, but no less watchful. You close your eyes. The fig tree stands tall in the distance. The roses close in on themselves like dreams wrapping up for the evening. The axes have all been returned to their hooks, each one glinting faintly in the fading light, their blades scented, their edges dulled by patience rather than disuse. The palace sleeps. So can you. Let the paths disappear into mist. Let the orange blossoms soften into memory. Let the names you've carried fall away like petals after the rain. You are not pruning tonight. You are blooming. Rest now, gentle gardener. Your work is done.